She informs him they don't, but recognizes him as the material gatherer everyone's been talking about. Takeru confirms this, and she introduces herself as Reeve, offering her help. She explains that her master, Grusas, is a top-tier blacksmith, so he can surely help him, although first he'll need to get something the old man has been looking for. Takeru agrees to hear the details, so Reeve lets him in and shows him the workshop. He is clearly impressed by her craftsmanship, and she mentions that she is among those who fell in love with the forge's flame. Reeve assures him that one day she will steal the old man's technique and forge a hero's sword. Takeru then tells her he really hopes her dream will come true someday, and then he follows her to the master's office. Grusas immediately asks what Takeru is doing there, so Reeve informs him that he's the material gatherer everyone's been talking about lately. Somewhat skeptical, Grusas comments that it's a great reputation for a newcomer, but Takeru clarifies that he's just been lucky. Reeve mentions to her boss that she was thinking perhaps he might be able to procure some Hydra ore for the sword they plan to present at the upcoming Artisans exhibition. Grusas immediately replies that there's no way he's sending a gatherer to the Ryuhai mine because it's too dangerous. Reeve tries to convince him, saying he'll never know unless he asks if he's willing. Grusas suddenly raises his voice to silence her, saying the answer is still no. She, stubborn, keeps insisting, reminding him there's a deadline he needs to consider. Reeve pulls on his beard and challenges him to forge the sword with second-rate materials if he insists so much, to see if he can still call himself a master after that. Grusas yells at her, saying she has a lot of nerve to say something like that, but warns her that Ryuhai isn't just monster-infested right now. There are rumors of demons down there. Reeve eventually calms herself, then admits she also heard such whispers, speculating that the Hydra ore supply's drastic decline could indeed be attributed to that very entity residing within. Grusas asks if she already mentioned that to the gatherer, and Reeve feels guilty upon realizing she hadn't. Then Grusas tells her that a blacksmith who doesn't value life has no right to hold a hammer at all. He's sincerely grateful she brought the gatherer for the sake of the forge, but he won't send a young man to his death just because they're desperate. Reeve looks at her master with admiration, clearly moved, so she apologizes to Takeru and asks him to forget the whole thing. However, Takeru simply offers them some cookies and understands that the only suitable ore for their sword is in the dangerous Ryuhai mine. With that in mind, he asks Grusas if he successfully gathers Hydra ore from that mine to forge him a pair of shears, a reward only he can use. Grusas asks if he didn't hear a word he said, but Takeru assures him he can handle whatever is down there. To prove it, he shows them a beast's body part from a monster he vanquished, one that even B-rank adventurers would struggle to defeat. That's enough for them to allow him to accept the job, so Takeru soon takes a cart, understanding his destination is beyond Buera village, managed by boss Raulif. Vi suddenly tells him she wants to eat crab, but Takeru unfortunately informs her they're all out. Some passengers are reporting that strange occurrences have been happening recently. For example, all the poisonous herbs in Robri Pass withered away overnight. They also heard there were disturbances in the forest of white trees. Takeru silently listens to the conversation, trying to convince himself it wasn't his fault. After a while, he arrives at a town where there's a horse merchant and thinks it would be nice to travel by horse someday. Just as he's about to leave, Takeru hears a woman arguing with the merchant and realizes it's the elf they met before. She tells the man she asked for a pure white steed that could gallop through the skies, but he's showing her a giant white bird, not a horse. The man reminds her that this is a horse merchant, and around here they call any cargo-carrying creature a horse, whether it's a giant eagle or a giant crow. The elf clearly didn't know that, so she apologizes, admitting she might have worded her request poorly. The merchant forgives her right away, saying that he should have confirmed it better himself. He tells her, as she seeks a white Pegasus, she might find it in Bosraol, the dwarf kingdom. The elf leaves, happy with the information, and Takeru realizes she's heading to the same place they are. Aside from that, he tells Vi they can take their time and gather some materials along the way. The first thing he collects is a Norid's mushroom, a poisonous-looking mushroom with white spots on a green cap. Despite its appearance, it's actually a very nutritious ingredient that boosts stamina. He also gathers a Mauzo mushroom, which is a red-capped mushroom with white spots that promotes rapid growth and development when consumed. Takeru realizes the forest around them is a true treasure trove of ingredients. They also find the moonlit night herb, a yellow flower that is said to bloom under the crescent moon. Its nectar is a favorite of spirits and helps relieve fatigue. Also, When crushed, it can be used as an effective ointment to heal wounds. Takeru immediately uses his gathering shears to collect some, but a familiar growl is then heard in the forest. This time they recognize the sound instantly and, as expected, they find the elf sitting against a tree, completely thirsty and starving. The situation is all too familiar for Takeru, who decides to give her food and water, just like the first time. Feeling completely revitalized, the woman approaches him to shake his hand, expressing her profound gratitude. Takeru smiles, yet her overwhelming scent causes him to recoil, instinctively deploying his cleaning magic. The elf's grimy body is clean in a matter of seconds, and Takeru simply comments that he couldn't stand seeing the image of the pure and elegant elves crumble before his eyes. The woman smiles and finally introduces herself as Bel Bareta Brolite, though she admits elven names are difficult for humans. She tells him he did her a great favor now and before, but Takeru quickly brushes it off and says to take care. Bel stops him before he can leave and clarifies that elves do not repay kindness with indifference. He replies that he didn't help her expecting anything in return, but she asks to at least let her help him with his work. Vi seems to approve of the idea and is happy to have her around, so Takeru agrees to let her join him until they reach the next town. While he's gathering Noraid's mushrooms, Belle runs to him excitedly with Vi, saying she found something incredible. She shows him an object and claims it's droppings from a hammer anteater, but Takeru uses his appraisal skill and informs her it's just a rock. Belle doesn't give up and soon returns with something else, but Takeru tells her that what she's holding this time really is droppings. She decides to try one more time, but Takeru warns her that she's now holding a poisonous mushroom. Belle is surprised but then starts laughing with Vi, saying how terrifying that is. Takeru just watches her and thinks her mental age must be about the same as Vi's. When the sun sets, Belle decides to gather firewood, but Takeru tells her he has magic stones to start the fire. However, she explains that leaving traces of a campfire is important because it lets other travelers know this is a safe place to camp. With that in mind, she sets off to gather some firewood and soon returns. Takeru is a bit surprised to see she didn't bring firewood but a whole log. Belle just asks for his patience, then throws the log into the air, jumps up and slices it into pieces with 2 daggers. Takeru stares at her in amazement, wondering if all elves are really like this. Still, he admits the blades she used are impressive, so he uses appraisal to check their details. He's shocked to discover they're actually A-rank weapons, since it's the first time he's ever seen any. Belle's weapon is called Sylph Jambia, a treasure of the High Elves. These daggers, infused with Wind Spirit's power, boost both speed and sharpness, their efficacy fluctuating based on the wielder's latent magical strength. Even amongst the High Elves, only those possessing a chosen bloodline are able to wield them. Putting that aside, Takeru uses the firewood to cook his favorite soup, and Belle is excited to try it. The instant she takes a sip, Belle is utterly captivated. Both Belle and Vi thoroughly enjoy the soup, and though Takeru suspects they're overdoing it, he's happy they appreciate it nonetheless. While eating, Belle asks if he's also going to Boss Raul. He says he has a job, collecting Hydra ore from Ryuhai Mine. Takeru inquires why she's going there, and Belle, with a serious expression, explains her quest for the White Pegasus of the Skies, the very one her sister Rayutikara has always dreamed about. Takeru really tries to take her seriously, but seeing the crumbs on her face ruins the moment. Belle wipes her face with her sleeve and smoothly changes the subject, noting that she again had quite the feast on his food, so her debt to him continues to grow. Takeru then suggests hiring her as his bodyguard, as he could certainly benefit from someone who can teach him things, like that campfire trick. Belle is surprised that's all he's asking for, though Takeru is sure that's already asking a lot. After they finish eating, Belle says that whatever fate united them here, she'll consider it a good omen. So, she accepts his offer, declaring she'll join him on this journey as his personal bodyguard. Takeru is surprised by how reliable she seems, but her snoring kept him awake that night. The next morning, the dark circles under his eyes are obvious, but he keeps walking as Belle informs him that on the other side of the river lies the Dwarf Kingdom and the Ryuhai mountain range. Without thinking, he remarks that it looks a lot like the Hotaka mountain range from his homeland. Belle doesn't understand him, but he drops the topic and decides to find food first. They go to a restaurant and order 3 servings of the dwarven specialty, meat-wrapped yuppie. Takeru eagerly takes the first bite and is delighted by the flavor, while Belle comments that it's just like her friend told her. He assumes she means another elf, but she clarifies that her friend is a lizardman, an honorary dragon king, and a holy dragon knight of the Stolfas Empire. Her friend mentioned he was heading to Belka, so Takeru might have already run into him. Just then, Clayton appears out of nowhere and tells her it was much more than that. Belle happily greets her friend, saying it's been forever, but Clay scolds Takeru for leaving without telling him. A little nervous, Takeru explains that he technically reported it to the guild, so he must have known. Clay accuses him of being too vague, as always, and demands to know exactly where he's going. Takeru informs him he's headed to the Ryuhai mine for Hydra material, but Clay is utterly shocked upon hearing this news. After all, mining contracts of that kind aren't even allowed to be taken by someone of his standing. Takeru explains that they seem to be in a tough spot, and he couldn't just ignore it. Clay warns him that the Ryuhai mine is extremely perilous, so the compensation better be truly excellent, or he'll deeply regret it. Takeru informs him that he will get a reward, because Grusa's promised to forge him the ultimate pair of scissors, if he can just win his favor. Acquire a fine cooking pot or an omelette pan. Clay is a bit surprised at first, but then he sighs and says that he can't quite tell if Takeru is truly kind-hearted or just hopelessly naive. Takeru assures him that for a collector, a pair of scissors is more important than a sword, so he truly believes it's a great reward. Feeling he has no other choice, Clay decides to join him. He was already planning to visit Boss Raoul for spear repairs anyway. Takeru hesitates a little at first, but gets excited when he learns that Clayston will also be Takeru's bodyguard. She informs him that she is traveling with Takeru as his bodyguard on the way to Boss Raoul. Clay admits the title sounds good, so he agrees to be Takeru's second bodyguard. Now, with a grumpy old samurai and a clueless elf beside him, Takeru feels a vague unease he can't quite place. The next day, they finally arrive at Boss Raoul, but they find a large crowd waiting at the entrance. Takeru remarks that all the city entrances they visited are just as crowded, which is already a serious problem. Despite this, Clay decides to talk to one of the guards, and they are let through immediately without having to wait. Takeru questions if that's fine, assuming he received VIP treatment, but Clay explains he simply greeted an acquaintance. The guard then guides them inside, clarifying that Boss Raoul originally began as a mining settlement constructed within the vast caverns formed by extensive iron extraction. He welcomes them to the Dwarf Kingdom, and Takeru is shocked to see there is an entire underground city. The guard informs Clayston that the king has requested his presence, and Takeru is even more surprised to learn that his friend knows the monarch. Clay tells him you could call it an old and complicated relationship, but the guard insists there's nothing complicated about it. After all, he is the hero who saved him from the Thunder King Zengum in person. Clayston says it wasn't as grand as it sounds, and explains that back then, the dwarves were skilled in blacksmithing, but incapable of wielding weapons, so they were forced to pay tribute to a ruthless demon lord. The moment that demon happened to see him passing by, it took one look and fled in terror, and that was it. Takeru still thinks that's impressive, and the guard tells him that to commemorate that day, they built a statue in his honor. Everyone is impressed upon seeing the statue, but Clayston is completely embarrassed by the scene. Takeru tries to calm him down, saying it doesn't even look like him, but Clay replies that's precisely the problem, because his name is written on it, which means people will think that's what he actually looks like. Thus, upon seeing King Swordwing, Clay laments how hideous the statue appears. Takeru then decides to speak with the king and hands him a letter of presents from Grusas Vendesus, the Blacksmiths Guild representative from the Velkeen Commercial District. In the letter, Grusas requests permission for Takeru to enter the Ryuhai mine and obtain some materials. Swordwing seems to know Grusas very well and explains that several months ago, that mine turned into a demon nest after the great earthquake that shook the region. Takeru assures him he still wants to go, and Clayston informs the king that Takeru is under his protection, and that Bell is also a formidable warrior, so there's nothing to worry about. Knowing this, the king decides to entrust them with the mission of discovering the truth behind the demonic disturbances inside the Ryuhai mine. Clayston accepts without hesitation, but Takeru has no idea what truth they're referring to. He reminds them that he just needs to collect some Hildra ore, but Clay accepts the mission without even listening to him. Shortly after, they meet Sambo, the Adventurers Guild head receptionist for the city. He informs them that he will be in charge of guiding them through the tunnels and then opens a door to let them pass. Takeru casts a simple light spell and checks the map Sambo gave them so they don't get lost. He uses his matter recognition ability in the mine, but he then notices that the mineral reaction around him feels quite weak. Sambo is surprised he can tell that just by looking, and Takeru decides to head a little deeper inside. However, Vi suddenly warns them of something, and Clayston orders them to get their backs against the wall, because something is approaching. Clay and Bell prepare for combat, but Takeru aids them with his support magic, taking down foes. Bell finishes off the monsters with her daggers, so they continue deeper, where the magical concentration is more intense. Takaru reaches a dead end and senses something deeper behind the wall, so he puts up a barrier, hardens the surface, and unleashes bursts of fire against it. Sambo is utterly stunned to find Hildrite veins absolutely everywhere, as it is an incredibly rare mineral. Takaru scans it and confirms it as A-rank material, while Clayston remarks that it's practically equivalent to a magic stone. Vi suddenly alerts them to another danger, and Sambo shouts that a demon is coming. Takaru's expression immediately turns quite serious, and he implores Bell and Clay to let him take charge of this particular matter, as he truly needs to do it himself. Just then, a giant crab suddenly appears before them, but Takeru and Vi can only see its shell on that thing.